Welcome back, friends. Dan Vega here, back with another tutorial. And today we're going to be talking about learning VueJS as a beginner. Learning JavaScript frameworks in general can be a little bit overwhelming just because of all the complexities that go into kind of modern frameworks. Vue, on the other hand, is what's known as a progressive JavaScript framework. And all that means is that it can be incrementally adopted as your needs start to grow. So without installing Node, NPM, or any of these command line interfaces, we can just take Vue, drop a script tag into a web page, and start taking advantage of it. So that's what we're going to look at in today's tutorial. But before I get there, I just want to mention that I am working on a course called Up and Running with VueJS. And if you head over to danvega.dev and click on courses and click on getting started with Vue, right now it's going to open up a sign up page. So if you want to be notified when this course is complete, I have 5 free lessons that are going to be made available if you sign up on this page. So that'll give you an idea of what this course is about and who it's for. And again, it's really geared towards beginners and really kind of walking you through first steps and how to get started without installing everything right at the beginning. So enough of a shameless plug. That's kind of what I've been working on, but let's jump into Vue. So what I like to do is I come over here and go to the Get Started. The documentation for Vue is really good, so I would suggest kind of going through the documentation after this. It'll just give you some more kind of next steps on what to do. But for us, all we care about is right here in this Getting Started section. You'll see that there's a development version of the script. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy that along with that comment so that I know if I ever push this particular thing into production, I should probably swap it out for the production version. But in development, you get some useful warnings that are helpful when you're getting started. So what this is a script, just like, say, a jQuery that we can drop into a web page and begin using Vue. Now, don't mind whatever version this says that it's using. If you're watching this in the future and you're using a newer version, it should work the same. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to head over to my editor, Visual Studio Code. You can use any text editor you like. I'm using this one. So I have a folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and let's just call it hellovue.html. And in Visual Studio Code, I can type in HTML and kind of get a little bit of a scaffold as to the project. So I'm going to say hello Vue. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and drop that script on this page here. So now I've included Vue. And so what we want to do is I want to kind of mimic maybe an existing application that we might have. So let's say that we had a header tag, and this was our header, and we had a footer, and this was our footer. And then we kind of had this area that was, say, our app area where we had some different content going on. So what I want to do is say that I want to like put in some type of interactive or dynamic content into that div with an ID of app. So just to kind of style things up too, what I'm going to do is actually drop some style tag in here. And we're just going to say that I'm going to actually just copy this in. Nothing special. All it's saying is, hey, for the header and the footer, I want you to give it some padding, a little bit of a background color, change the color of the text, just to kind of make it stand out. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a new script block down here. And the way that we start out with Vue is by using the new Vue. So we're creating a new instance of Vue. And Vue takes in an object with some different options about what you're doing here. So one of those options is the element, so EL. And what it's asking for is, all right, where on this page do you want to use Vue? And for us, we want to use Vue in the app. So we give it an ID of app. And what that does is kind of attach the Vue instance. So we're creating a new Vue instance to our div with an ID of app. So what we can also have here is data. So we have data. Now any data that we create in here is what we call reactive data. As it changes, the DOM will go ahead and update for us. So I'm going to put a message in here and I'm going to call it hello Vue. And that's all there is to it. So now I have this data property called message, and now I need to somehow display it on my page. So I'm going to come up here. Remember, it has to be within this app because that's what we told our Vue instance is kind of where we're using Vue. So I'm going to say h1, and I'm going to use this double curly bracket syntax, and then the name of the variable or data that I want to display there. So that's all there really is to it. I've created this kind of hello world, and I want to go ahead and run this and see if this works out. So one way I can do this is I have an extension in Visual Studio Code called Open with Live Server, and all this does is run a little local web server so that I can open up that particular file right here in Chrome. So as you can see, it is hello Vue. Now what is really cool about this is if we come in here, we can go ahead and assign a variable to this, right? Well, first off, anything we do in here, so if we go ahead and save this, you'll see that the exclamation point goes away if I save it again. So we get that little hot reloading with the live server extension. We can really start to work on our application here. So one thing that I want to do here is I'm going to create a variable here that is assigned to our Vue instance. So I'm going to say VM is equal to new Vue, and Vue follows the Vue model pattern, so you'll often see it shorthand or assigned to a variable called VM, and that's really all it is. You could name that whatever you want to. But just with that little change there, we can go back to the browser, and I can go ahead and open the DevTools. So I have some DevTools open here, and I have a VM, and I can say vm.message is equal to another message. And as soon as I hit enter, you're going to see that change on the page. And that's because that data, that property, that data that we set in there is reactive. So anytime it changes, the DOM will go ahead and change because we use that curly bracket syntax there. So that's kind of the first thing. And I do want to kind of mention something. As you get into Vue, you might see this syntax. So you have data, and basically data is an object. So once you start getting into creating components and stuff, your DevTools may start complaining to you that dev really needs to be a function that returns an object. And so it's good to kind of get into this practice right away. So what I like to do is I'm going to create data as a function that just returns an object. And then nothing else will change. Everything is working as it was. So, okay, so now we have that. That's kind of our intro. We are a quintessential hello world, if you will. What I want to do is dive in and create something a little bit more advanced and take advantage of something called components in Vue. So I'm going to create an index.html. Again, we're going to do this, and I'm going to call this Twitter Friends. And I'm going to go back to hello Vue and just grab that same script tag that we were using. I'm going to pop that in here. Actually, I'm going to copy all of this because we're going to use most of it. And again, we'll call this Twitter Friends. And so we have our header, our app, and our footer. And then we have this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, and we're going to start to work on something else here. So what I want to do is I want to create an application where I can kind of display a list of my Twitter friends. And these are some people that you should follow in the Vue community. And so what I'm going to do is copy this and paste this in. So we have some friends here, and friends is just an array. So again, we're in our data function in our return object here, and this is where we're setting any type of data that we want to be reactive. So now we can't just come up here and go like this, right? Because that friends is an array of strings. So what we want to do is we need some way to kind of iterate over those friends and display them out on a page. So one way that we can go ahead and do that is, let's go ahead and create an unordered list. And what we want to do is we want to repeat a list item for every friend in that list, right? So what we can do is we can use something called a directive in Vue. And one of these directives is v_for. And v_for allows us to iterate over a list. So what we can do is we can say for every friend in our friends array, I want you to go ahead and do something. And in this case, we're going to use that curly bracket syntax again, but we're just going to output friend. So as I'm iterating over this, every one of those is going to be assigned to a variable of friend. And since that's just a plain string, we can go ahead and output that. So let's see how this looks. And I'm going to go ahead and open this with Live Server. And as you can see, we have our list of friends. So what I want to do is actually, because this will look a little better, I'm actually going to copy over some styles as well. And this will become a little bit more apparent later why I'm doing this. But here we go. We basically added some styles to say like, all right, I want the list style type to be none, and I want you to give me a little line height in between the list items. So this is good. So far so good, but our app is kind of boring right now, right? Like we haven't really done anything that we couldn't have just statically done, right? We could have came in here and we could have just created 5 separate LIs with our friend and a link to them and be done with it. But this is obviously a little bit shorter. If you just had like an array and you had like 100, you wouldn't want to statically type this out yourself. But what if we were fetching this data from somewhere else? So let's talk about that. Let's come in here, and what I want to do is I want to create a folder here. And inside of data, I'm going to copy over some JSON here. So let's say I have a new file, and I'm going to call this friends.json. And I'm just going to paste them in. And now I have an array of objects. And in this array of objects, I have an ID, which is their actual Twitter handle, and the name of that person or account that I'm following. So now what I can do is actually come in here, and so we have this VM, right? What we're going to do is actually say, all right, well, this is actually just going to be an empty array. And what I want to do is actually go out and fetch those friends from the JSON file. So now this is a local JSON file, but this could easily be on a web server or an API somewhere that we can go out and get. So we're just going to use the local fetch, and we're going to say that I want to grab that data from data friends.json. And then I'm going to, oops, that's going to be a get, so we don't need to do that. And so what I want to do is when I get that, so when you use fetch, the first thing that it does is it's going to return to you a response. So we're going to return a response, and we're going to get the JSON data out of that response. So we're going to say return that JSON. Then we're going to say, all right, that also returns a promise. So what we're going to say is, all right, I want to get the friends out of that JSON. And now that we have this variable here, this VM, so we've created this Vue instance, we've assigned it to VM, we can go ahead and say vm.friends, because that's the data that we've set here, which is an empty array, is going to equal friends from our data/friends JSON file. And just to be on the safe side, we'll go ahead and catch any errors, and we will console.error them. And that should be good. So now let's go back over. Now this is going to break because before we were just displaying a simple string, right? Now we have an array of objects that have multiple pieces of data. So here, when we say friend and friends, that friend is the entire single record. So in our case, we just want to display the name, right? So if we display the name, everything looks good. So now the next kind of evolution of this program, we might want to make this reusable. I could see us wanting to display a list of our friends on multiple pages, right? So the way that we can do this in Vue is by creating components. And components are reusable components that we could then go ahead and drop anywhere in our app. So we could use it on this page, we could use it on another page, we can use it, more than one time on this particular page if we wanted to. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to create a new folder here because I like to keep them kind of separated. I'd like to keep all my code kind of bundled together. I'm going to create a components folder, and I'm going to create a Twitter friends folder. So now inside of Twitter friends, I'm going to create a new file, and let's just call this twitterfriends.js. All right, so the way that I'm going to create my component is by using vue.component. And component takes a string, which is the name of the component, and then an object with a bunch of options, kind of like the Vue instance. So what I'm going to say is the name of my component is Twitter Friends. Now, there are some style guidelines that you can read through in the docs, but mainly you don't want this to be like a single word like P or table, right? Because these are existing elements, and this is a element that we're going to go ahead and drop on a page at some point. So again, this takes an object, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our data function. Remember, this returns an object just like it did in the Vue instance, and just like we did over here. So again, we have return, we have an empty array of something called friends. So what I'm going to do is delete that from there. I'm going to come over here and do the same here. So I'm going to say friends is an empty array. So now the next thing is, because we're not on a page, we need a way to define what the markup is going to look like. And the way that we do that is with something called a template. Now we could put this inside of a string and go like this and go like this, but that kind of gets messy. I like to be able to put this on multiple lines, and to do so, I'm going to use the template literal syntax, which is that backtick, which then allows me to go ahead and add code on multiple lines. So what I'm basically doing then is taking this, so I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to paste it here in the template. And if we save that, that's what it looks like. So we have our data, which is our empty array. We have our template, which is the same markup that we are using in the index. Now what I need is a way to go ahead and go out and get the list of friends from that data file. And the way that we do that is we have these different lifecycle hooks in Vue. And one of those is, there are different ones like created and mounted and destroyed. Again, something you can kind of read through in the documentation. But one of those lifecycle hooks is created. And what this does is it will run when the component is created. So this is a very good place where I can go out and fetch my data. So I'm going to go ahead and actually cut that because we don't need it on that page anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste this. Oops, I think I messed up there. Let's cut and paste, and there we go. So this is doing the same thing. It's going to go out and fetch a list of friends from a data file. It's just doing that within the context of this component. Now we have this friends object here, and we no longer have a VM, right? We don't have a Vue instance that's assigned to a variable called VM, but we do have data in this component that we can refer to. And the way that we do that is with the this keyword. So this component's friends array is going to be set to whatever we get back from that promise that's returned when we get the JSON from the response. So far, so good. Everything is starting to look pretty good. So now what I can do is actually come over to my index, and right above here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say I need to pull in another script tag. And where I'm going to get this from is components, Twitter friends, and then our Twitter friends JS. So now that we've kind of pulled in that component, we can go ahead and use that component on our page. And we're going to use it wherever we've told Vue to go ahead and use itself. So again, we're still working within the confines of this ID app here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Twitter dash friends, and that's where I'm going to display my list of friends. So if all went well, let's go back to the browser, and something did break, which is okay. Let's go over to the console. And so it says templates should only be responsible for mapping to the UI. So we have our script here. We have Twitter friends, which is right. We have our script here, which is going to, I don't think we need this anymore. And let's just reload this. I don't think it had anything to do with that VM, it just wasn't reloaded. So we've essentially created the same markup that we had before, right? We have taken all that stuff that was specific to this page and we've moved it into a component that we can now use on other pages. So if we created another page, we can just import that JavaScript file and we can use it just like we would any other markup on a page. Now, there's one thing that's kind of wrong with this, and that is that no matter what we do, we're always using the same JSON file, right? Because we've hard-coded in here data/friends.json. So if we wanted to make this a little bit more extensible, maybe we wanted to display a list of friends on one page. Maybe we wanted to display people that we follow in the Vue community on one page and JavaScript on another and Java on another, right? So we can create different data files or even call APIs to get those lists of friends. So what we can do is actually remove this hard-coded data, and we can actually add something called a prop. So a prop is basically something that is something that this component is going to take in. And again, this is something you want to look in the docs for. There's a couple different syntaxes for this. You can just define an array of strings, and those are the prop names. You can actually get a little bit more detailed and define what type of data the prop is, what the default is, but I'm just going to stick with this and just say data. So now here in our fetch, we can just refer to that and say this.data. Again, if we did want to define a default value, we could, but I'm not going to. So if we were to look at this in the browser, it would be broke because we have no data being passed into this. So if we go back to our index, now what we could do is say data, and we actually want to get data from friends.json. So now if we go ahead and save this, there is our list. So cool, everything looks like it's working really good. I want to go ahead and change one thing. So here in our template, I want to actually say, let's go ahead and add a link and for that friend name. And that link is going to go to something like https www.twitter.com/then the username. So anytime that we say href and then a string, it's looking for an actual literal string. In Vue, anytime that we want an attribute to kind of be dynamic, we use this dot syntax, so this colon syntax, kind of refers or kind of tells this attribute that, hey, I don't want you to just accept a string literal anymore. I want you to go ahead and evaluate this. So I'm going to say that's our starting URL. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, I want you to grab the friend ID because that is their ID. That's like the at Vue Mastery or at whatever it is. So if we look at data and friends.json, you'll see like the actual at, and that's how we get to that particular user. So now if we go back over to here and I go ahead and click on Vue Mastery, it's going to open up their Twitter profile. So cool, this is starting to look a little better. Now one thing I want to do also is this stuff looks like it's very specific to our Twitter friends component, right? So here I'm going to come in here and create a Twitter friends.css, and now I have styles that are just only specific to that particular component. Now, this is a very simple example, so I have used ULs and LI. You would probably want to get more specific with that, but for this example, that'll work. Then I can come in here and say, all right, I also want you to go ahead and pull in those styles. So please go ahead and grab them from components, Twitter friends, and our CSS file. So if we go back, everything should look the same. Oh, it doesn't though. Oh, that's why. I don't know why we had an extra one in there. Okay, so now everything looks exactly the same again. So now just finally to kind of show this off, if we wanted to, we could put multiple instances of this on the page. So I'm going to put 3, and they're all going to display the same list. But if I wanted to, I could easily have something called Vue friends and Java friends and JavaScript friends. And that is how we can display that same component on a page multiple times. Or again, we can use it, reuse it throughout our application as a component. So I think that's where we're going to stop today. Again, I think next steps are really dive into the documentation. It's really good. You can kind of learn a little bit more about what's going on and things like list rendering and event handling and the reactivity system. But what I wanted to kind of focus in on this particular tutorial with was that you don't need to understand the entire tool chain to get up and running with Vue. It's very easy to drop a script tag into an existing page or even a new page and start taking advantage of all the things that Vue can do right away without having to buy into this whole, like, again, it can be a little bit overwhelming at first. So start with this, and then once you get a little bit more familiar with it and maybe you want to take it to the next level, that's when you can start to look at Node and NPM and install the CLI and create a new application with the Vue CLI and so forth. So if you found this tutorial helpful, please click on that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and as always, friends, happy coding.